share with you today some thoughts about our concept of what is natural and what is supernatural. I'm a little older than most of you in this room, and I remember when I was a kid, there were superheroes that we looked up to, that we admired. Now, I was reflecting on this as I was thinking about my sermon this week, because when I was a kid, and you have to understand, this was back in a long time ago, okay? Can I just say it was before color television, okay? It wasn't quite back as far as just radio, but it was before color television. And so my superhero was Superman, okay? Superman was amazing. I mean, this guy, Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for the newspaper, could step into a room and then step out of it almost momentarily and be changed into his Superman tights and his cape. He was able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, faster than a speeding locomotive, or faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. See, it's been a long time, I forgot. This man could do stuff that no human could do. He could fly up in the air, he could pick up a meteorite, and he could fly it out into outer space. He had X-ray vision. That's a little dangerous today, I would say. He had X-ray vision. He could see through walls. Nothing could stop him. A bullet, he could catch it in his teeth and spit it out like it was nothing. And as a little boy, I really admired this guy because he was bigger than life. As I grew a little older, there was another duo, superheroes, but I was reflecting on them, and these guys had no superpowers whatsoever, but they were still cool because they drove really cool cars. They wore black capes with a bat symbol on the back, Batman and Robin. And by then we had color television, so they were in living color, and they really looked good in their tights, okay? And the Joker couldn't stop them. All of these guys, they were amazing. Even though they were human, they seemed to be superhuman. But then I grew up. And what I thought was very real, I discovered was just fantasy. There is nobody that can run faster than a speeding bullet. There is no one man who is more powerful than a locomotive. Or is there? Or is there? You see, because I was reading in the Bible the other day, I'm going to pull this over here so I can get a little closer to it. I was reading in the Bible the other day about a man who could do some pretty amazing stuff. I've got to put my eyes on here. I remind you that I'm old. In the book of Matthew, chapter 14, we read an interesting passage here. If you go ahead and turn there, I'm going to kind of start the process here a little bit. Jesus was this guy's name. And it says that he went out to a desolate place by himself, but when the crowds heard that he was there, they followed him on foot from the towns. And it says when he went ashore, a great crowd had gathered, and he had compassion on them, and he healed their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place. The day is now over. Send the crowd away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, that they need not go away. You give them something to eat. But they said to him, we only have 5 loaves here and 2 fish. And he said, bring them to me. Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing, and then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces that were left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, beside the women and children. I want you to get a mental picture of this. 5 loaves, okay? 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's not even a large size Happy Meal, hardly. Okay? And the disciples said, we got to send this crowd away. They got to get something to eat. They're hungry. They've been out here all day listening to you talk and teach. You got to go and you got to send them into the town so they can eat. And he said, no, you feed them. And they kind of pulled their pockets out and realized they didn't have any money. And they said, well, between all 12 of us, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Okay? And he took it and he blessed it. And he began to distribute it, breaking it apart and giving it out. And everybody ate and was full. And then they had 12 basketfuls left over. Now, that was not an accident. It couldn't have been 13 or 11. It had to be 12. You know why? Because there were 12 disciples. And each one of them had to carry one of those baskets away. Superhero to the people that day. Supernatural circumstances. And you know what? They got so excited that they wanted to make him their king, because they realized that if this guy could do that, then he could do lots of other powerful stuff, and he could be our superhero. And we want somebody to come and rescue us from this terrible plight that we're under, with the Roman government with their sandal on our neck. And so they pressed him to make him their king, and he resisted that, and he dismissed the crowd. And it says he went up on a mountain to pray. He put the disciples, before he went up on the mountain, though, into a boat and sent them across the Sea of Galilee to the other side. Now, you need to understand, this was in the evening when he began to break those loaves and fishes. And so by the time these disciples got into the boat, this was dark. Okay, now there weren't street lights like we have today. There were no, like super beam flashlights, okay? So they basically were rowing in the dark, okay? Now, if you know anything about that area over there, you realize that because of the way the mountains form around the Sea of Galilee, when you have the warm water and the warm air coming off of that water, and that colder air coming off of those mountains, and it mixes together, it can create some great storms. Okay? And so what happened is these guys get out on the middle of this Sea of Galilee, this huge lake, and one of these storms came up, and some of that hot air comes off the Golan Heights over there, and that all mixes together, and it can create some pretty fantastic storms. And we're told that some of the waves can get as high as 9 feet. Now, these guys are in a boat that's about 20 feet long. Okay, 20 feet. That's like from there to about here. 12 guys in a boat rowing, 20 feet long. Waves are 9 feet high. Get the picture. Precarious situation. Precarious situation. Let's pick it up there. Let's read what the Bible says here, because this is vital. This is important for us to understand this. It says he immediately made the disciples get into the boat before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After he dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. All right, get this picture here, okay? They're out in the middle of this lake, and they're rowing hard against this wind and these waves, and all of this stuff's going on, and all of a sudden, now, it doesn't say there was like rain and lightning, but I kind of picture, when you've got those various different temperatures all kind of coming together, that it's going to create a pretty significant storm. And so I can imagine that the only light that they would have would be momentary flashes of lightning. And can you imagine yourself, if you're the one that's in that boat, and you're rowing hard and you're scared to death already because this boat could capsize at any moment, and all of a sudden a lightning flashes and you see a vision, you see a man walking towards you on the water. And they say, "It's a ghost! It's a ghost!" So the pucker factor just got higher, okay? It just got higher. But look at what happens. Look at what happens. This is amazing. Look at what happens. It says, "But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, 'Take heart, it's I. Do not be afraid.' Peter said, 'Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water.'" Let's stop right there. Peter is not the sharpest tack in the boat. That's mixing metaphors, I realize that, but that's okay. He's not the sharpest tack in the box. Peter, I like Peter a lot because I kind of identify with him, because lots of times Peter would open his mouth and he would not engage his brain, and he would say something, and then he would later go, "Oh, wow, that was a bad thing to say." And I do that a lot. My wife attributes that to my ADHD and some other stuff that I would rather not talk about. But the point is that I like Peter because Peter is a regular guy, I mean, Peter's like you and me. He's not a superhero. Peter's just trying to do the best he can, trying to get by with what he can get by with. And so Peter has a moment of what some people would call insanity here, because he says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." All right, think about that. Think about that. Now, I have indeed walked on water. Okay, I have done that. I went to Cragen's up in Minnesota in the dead of winter, and I walked way out on the lake, and there was no problem. Okay, but I suspect there was no ice underneath the feet of Jesus as he was walking towards them on this water. But Peter says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus says one word, "Come." Come. You see, Jesus knows what Peter was capable of if he had enough faith. See, this is the problem today, is that we have relegated superheroes to fantasy, and secretly we all wish we had superpowers. Come on, let's keep it real. We all wish we had something that we could do that's above ordinary, something's extraordinary. But we also live in a realistic society, and we realize that that's not realistic, that man, you and me, can have superpowers. We just got regular stuff that we can do, okay? Sometimes we're not even that good with that, okay? But we all kind of fantasize about having some superpower, Some of the biggest blockbuster movies that have come out are like superheroes, the Avengers and all of this stuff is making millions of dollars at the box office, and we flock to that because secretly we kind of choose which one of those we'd like to be, and that kind of thing. But listen to this. Listen to this. Peter, regular Joe, regular guy, Peter does something amazing here. He does something amazing here. He says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Okay, I'll take that challenge. Come, go ahead. Give it your best shot." Now, I did kind of fudge a little bit and say I've walked on water before. It was in Minnesota in the dead of winter. Okay, the lake was frozen. It was frozen water. Okay, it was ice. Okay, but aside from that, how many people here have walked on water? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Aside from frozen water. Okay, my hand's not up either. I want you to understand something. We want to have superpowers. But we say superpower is impossible. It can't happen. It can't be real. And we have programmed ourselves to say, if I can't see it, if I can't feel it, if I can't touch it, if I can't taste it, then it doesn't exist. We've done that. And so things like taking 5 loaves and 2 fish and breaking it and feeding it, we say, fairy tale. It can't happen. It's impossible. In the natural, it is impossible. In the natural, it is totally impossible. But you see, Jesus didn't operate in the natural. Amen. Jesus did not operate in the natural. And when his disciples really kept their focus on him, they were able to operate in the supernatural as well. Because what happens here in this story is that when Jesus said, come, Peter throws his leg over the side of the boat. Now, put yourself in the place of the other 11 guys that were in that boat for just a minute, okay? Peter, they just yelled, this is a ghost, and then Peter says, let me come to you, and Jesus says, come, and he throws his leg over the boat. Now, what are you thinking if you're one of the other 11 guys? What are you thinking about Peter? Here he goes again. Peter's going to mess up. He's going to, it's going to be crazy. We're going to have to jump in and rescue him, But something amazing happens, because what happens is that Peter does throw his leg over the side of the boat, and then he throws his second leg over the side of the boat. And he's standing up next to the boat. And he turns and lets go of the boat and starts walking towards Jesus. You can say what you want about Peter, okay? But aside from Jesus, he's the only other person that I've ever read about that could walk on non-frozen water. The only other person that's recorded that's ever done that. Now, this is the problem that we have. This is the problem that we have, is that we say you can't do that. That's impossible. It can't be done. And you know what? If you say that and you believe that, you're right. You see, when Jesus left this earth and he ascended into heaven after he had risen from the dead, another miracle there, because he had been killed, for sure been killed. He had been beaten to within an inch of his life. He had been nailed to a cross. He had been spat upon, a crown of thorns placed on his head, and he was hanging from a cross in extreme agony. And a soldier took a sword and pierced his side, and it said blood and water flowed out. And he cried out in a loud voice, "It is finished!" Friday dead, Sunday alive. Hey. And before he ascended into heaven, he said, "Greater things will you do than I have done, because I go to the Father." What does that mean? What does that mean? Those little words. What does that mean? It means that the things that I was able to do, all those supernatural things that I did while I was here on earth, you're going to be able to do those same things too. Only greater things than I have done, because I'm going to the Father. And oh, by the way, and I'm going to send the Holy Spirit, which is your superpower source. Now, Peter is just like you and me, except that he believed that he could walk on water. and he walked on water. But then he started realizing his circumstances. You know, he's walking on the water towards Jesus, and all of a sudden he kind of looks around and he goes, this is pretty cool. Wait a minute. You can't do this. This is impossible. And guess what? As soon as he started to doubt, he started to sink. And it says that Jesus was right there. He grabbed him by the hand. And once again, Peter walked on water, because it says they stepped into the boat. Now look, in order to step into a boat, you have to step off of something. You can't step off of water into a boat if you're not walking on water. Okay? So for the second time in his life, Peter walked on water as he stepped onto the water to step into the boat. And he and Jesus got into the boat with the other disciples. Now, I'm not saying that Peter gloated, but I'm sure that he kind of shut those other 11 guys up a little bit. Because for a while, I bet none of them wanted to harass Peter about anything, because none of those other guys were brave enough to do what Peter did. You see, that's where most of us are. We're not the Peter that's walking on the water. We're the other 11 guys. We're one of those other 11 guys that's sitting in the boat going, Peter, this is really stupid. You're going to make a fool of yourself. This can't be done. And you see, the truth is that God has called us not to stay in the boat. He's called us not to stay in the boat. The boat was the seemingly safe place. He's saying, if you want to experience supernatural power, if you want to experience the supernatural in your life, you've got to be willing to step out of the boat. Amen. You've got to be willing to take that step of faith. Some of you are here today, and your impression of Christianity is that it's right up there with fantasy land somewhere. That the thinking man or woman today doesn't believe all of this fanciful, silly stuff that we just talked about. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like the same thing that those 11 guys were thinking in that boat. You can't do this. It's impossible. It cannot be done. But the truth is that every person who calls himself a Christian began their journey of their Christian life by that very first step. It is a step of faith. To go from being unsaved, lost, and ready to die and go to hell, and being able to stand before God for eternity and worship Him. It begins with one step of faith. Much like Peter throwing his leg over the side of the boat. It takes faith. It cannot be done. It's not something you can see. It's not something you can touch. It's not something that you can kind of come down and write out the formula on paper and say, this is how you do it. This is how, like a recipe or something like that. It takes faith. It takes faith. And you know what? For most people, that step is too great for them to take. And if you're one of those people, then what I have to say to you is that I am extremely sorry for you. Because you don't know what you're missing. You don't know what you're missing by being safe, being one of those safe ones, one of those 11 guys in the boat. Or being the one that's ready to step out on faith. Listen, Jesus died on the cross. I already described how that happened. He didn't do that because he had done anything wrong. This was the just paying the penalty, the cost for the unjust. God made him who knew no sin to become sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God. Jesus stands ready to take your place. You see, if we get what we deserve, we're going to die and go to hell. But it simply takes a step of faith to turn that whole scenario around. Say, I'm going to take a chance on Jesus. I'm going to believe that Jesus was who he said he was, that he did what he said he did, and that he died for my sins. I'm going to take a chance on Jesus. Today, Jesus is saying to you, come. Just like he said to Peter that night on the water, come. It requires a step of faith. It requires you taking one step towards Jesus. And as soon as you do, what you will discover, as soon as you take that step, is that Jesus is right there to take you by the hand. You may have doubts. You may have fears. You may have concerns. When you're ready to take Jesus by the hand, take that step of faith and take Jesus by the hand. And his promise is that he will never leave you and he will never forsake you. So are you going to live in the world today where those kind of things are relegated to fantasy land? Or are you going to realize that there is power in the name of Jesus? That there is power available to you and to me, supernatural power. It's likened unto anything that we have seen, even on television, by our superheroes. That power is available to you and me if we're willing to take that first step. That first step of faith. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, I thank you